Because there's nobody counting them second by second to get a precisely accurate count.
Yeah.
Also, they didn't actually say that it was going to be January. I just did the math on the number of births versus the number of deaths, plus the estimate of how many people were alive today.
And how long is it held for at 2 to 1? Was that just one instant, or that was for several days?
No, I only look at it one day, and if that day was perfectly typical, then it would the forecast would be early January.
Yeah.
But since it's probably not typical, I mean, every day is a little bit different. If I was actually trying to make an accurate guess, I'd say sometime between November and April. It's a big error bar, isn't it?
I'm a member of another group, the Concord Area Humanists, and we have meet online discussions or talks every month. And I have recommended that the group might consider using Jitsi. But I was asked a question by the fellow who sets up the meetings about whether Jitsi has safety precautions that can keep out Zoom bombers and people like that. If there are ways of keeping meetings secure.
Yes. The person that really can talk about that much, much better is actually both David Kramer and Bill Ricker. Ricker usually gets here.
Okay.
So
my understanding is that the free service on meet.jit.c is that nobody can own anything, and therefore nobody can ban anybody. But if you buy service from somewhere where you're paying for it, or if you build your own server, the software is free, then you can lock it down. And I would be surprised if there aren't some Jitsi vendors out there that give you all the right access that you want.
Okay.
In addition to that is that you can set up a password, so you have a meeting ID and passwords that you send only to your members.
Oh, that's available in the free service? Okay.
Yes. Yeah.
Oh.
If you look on the top of your screen, you have a triangle. Room name is unsafe. Unwanted participants may join your conference. Consider securing your meeting using the security button.
Oh.
And security button.
And also, just straight out from the home page, if you just say create a meeting, it gives you a long random ID for the meeting.
Yes.
And you can't join it unless you don't know it. So you can't guess it.
Mm-hmm.
So if you have a channel to give secrets to members, then yes, you can keep everybody else out.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah, that should be.
Yeah, it's more secure than Zoom.
More secure.
I can't talk about the specifics because I haven't really researched it. If Bill Ricker comes in later, he can. Maybe Bill Bogstad can talk about it also.
BOX?
He's the big B. Bill Bogstad.
Oh, Bogstad.
Yeah, you probably know him. You've been in our meetings together.
It's on right now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, that's what I mentioned.
Oh.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. Actually, I am not really a Zoom expert at all. My wife spends a lot of time on Zoom, and anecdotally, I think Zoom has gotten better in terms of its security. But it sounds like Jitsi, from what you guys are saying, is probably good enough. That one of the big problems that comes up you mentioned was about having a secure channel to get the meeting information out to people. A
Mhm.
lot of the Zoom bombing was people who wanted to disrupt a meeting that they had to attend, and they would go and post the meeting link on some public forum somewhere, which obviously people then would bomb the meeting.
Mhm.
If you can generate per person links, obviously then you can track down who did this, but I don't know if Jitsi can do that.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure you need it. I'm pretty sure you need the not free Jitsi instance, but somewhere where either it's yours or you pay for it, and they give you admin controls and say, I own this channel and I can let people in and kick them out.
Mhm.
Okay,
Okay, thank you.
Bob Premack has his hand up.
Do I?
Yes,
I did
he
not.
lowered
pay
it.
You must say something
Oh.
interesting now.
There must be a control button that I hit.
Yeah,
Yep.
it's on the bottom of the toolbar.
Yeah, and for John, who's not been here before, we have a question and answer period, usually until about 7:15, where we usually start our speaker. Today, we're going to do a roundtable discussion, and the roundtable discussion will be based on packaging systems such as Snap, Appimage, and Flatpak. I actually gave a presentation on this a number of years ago, but I'm not an expert and I don't use those packages. We did have one time a guy from Canonical signed up to come to the meeting, but he never showed up.
There's
Yeah,
a
he was-
recent video from DistroTube about what he thinks of the different portable app package formats, and I'm going to, as soon as I find it, I'm going to drop the link in the chat.
Yeah.
To be watched later, of course, but
Yeah.
if anybody wants it.
I look at it in two ways. One way is if you look at it from a developer standpoint. I've discussed this with the developer of Photox, and but from a developer standpoint, you can put stuff together, and then you can, and that will probably work in most Linux distributions. But there's a downside of them. First of all, it's extra work for, well, it's not extra work, but it's, you know, you've got to put all the libraries together and stuff like that. So, and there's some other downsides I'll talk about. I think Jill is not, Dick and Jill aren't here. Jill Miller had a problem with Thunderbird. And I will talk about her situation later because I understand it. Thanks, Brendan.
Yep. And obviously that video is opinionated,
Yeah.
but it's interesting if you are into this topic.
Yeah. Well, you know, as a user, it just adds another bit of complexity. You know, Ubuntu users, you know, just want to use apt-get or Synopsys as their package manager. And of course, Fedora users like me want to use DNF or the GNOME package manager to install packages.
As an occasional software publisher, I can completely understand the issue, especially if you're not being paid for it. I just want to put out a package that'll work on the most number of computers possible without having to worry about supporting everyone installing it.
Exactly.
And as a user, that's okay. As long, if I really want the app and it's not in all the repos because it's new, then I'll take it. Especially when you're talking about like some browsers that take, 3 hours and a college degree to figure out how to compile.
Yeah, yep.
As a
You know,
heavy
my
user,
background is more into compilers and libraries, and working for big companies like DEC and Red Hat and IBM. But yeah, we had a product when I worked for Algorithmics that was really very difficult to install, and I actually had to write a script to install it. Originally, it was written in Bash. Bash really, so many different options and stuff like that, that Bash wasn't really appropriate for that. So I did in Tickle TK, but I had to do a bit of multitasking in there because some parts of the project actually had to be spun into separate processes or threads. I ended up doing it in Python with TK enter. And then I converted it to, I think it was GTK. I don't really remember, but it was TK enter had the same graphical commands as Tickle TK. So
Well, they took Tickle TK and they put it into Python and then
yes,
put a Python library around it. And
yeah.
the wonderful thing about that was that it was the same library, core feature of Python on every system that had Python.
Yes.
So you could write a few lines of code and have a dialog box.
That's correct. And so then I converted it, and it worked pretty well. And then the whole project I was on actually got canceled because we only really had about 4 companies. They were very wealthy companies, like Prudential, some of the big insurance companies. And the product we had was written in Java, and the company that actually wrote it was in the Netherlands, and their name was Second Floor. And the main developer we worked with was Italian. So I still communicate with the Italian guy through Facebook.
Oh, by the way, Jerry, if I write in the chat, does that appear in the YouTube recording?
Nope.
No.
Okay. I was talking about a video by DistroTube, and it's you can keep your snaps and Flatpaks. I'll take Appimages.
Yeah,
so there, it's been recorded.
I always save the chat and post it on the Blue website, so it'll be afterwards.
Yeah. Yeah, the chat's always saved if Jabba remembers to.
Oh, I always get to it eventually.
Yeah. So
it's like an old joke about the guy complaining about his wife saying, I told you, I said if I say I'm going to do something, I'm going to do it. You don't have to keep reminding me every 6 months.
speaking of getting to it, are we going to see the last couple of presentations on YouTube, or is that no longer happening anymore?
I'll be getting to it at some point. I just I have a problem with procrastination, I guess.
I've got 2 presentation recordings that I did in another club like 3 years ago now, and I haven't cut them and sent them to the YouTube guy yet.
Yeah, but we, after I record them, I download them to a shared Dropbox, and there Japper can pick them up. And when I know he's got them and copied, we can delete them or he deletes them. So some of them are still in YouTube, and I believe there's one that. Federico didn't want us to publish until after he made the talk. So
Actually, I already prepared that one. I just haven't made it public yet.
yeah.
Assuming the scale meeting doesn't get postponed again, we'll do that probably August 1st.
Yeah.
That's the week of July. It was originally going to be April because the scale meeting was supposed to be in March, but then it got postponed to July. Federico didn't want us to post until after he gave the presentation at that meeting.
So John, I think your indirect source is here, Chris Allen. Hi, Chris.
Hey, how's it going? We're talking about package managers.
Yeah.
Are we also going to talk about politics and religion?
We can if you want.
Sorry, I'm kidding.
So,
Emacs versus Vim.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Chris and I go back quite a while, and more recently we both worked together in the same building. I worked for Algorithmics, and Chris worked for another company, but our desks were a little bit apart. That's when after IBM bought Algorithmics, and then IBM bought his company. And then Chris left and went to Washington.
Yeah. Actually, I just got an offer earlier today for the Oregon State University open source lab.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah. So looking forward to that.
Yeah. Kurt says it's a good lab.
Yep. Cool. Yeah, I'll be working for Lance Robertson.
Got a curious question to ask that's not really Linux, but just curious. Do you have a lot of attendance on your live stream as opposed to coming into Jitsi?
It's usually not a lot. I don't really look at it that closely, but it's only just a few. Yeah, I think for most people, there's no need because the Jitsi is free and they can come in and they can talk there in real time. But I don't know.
The main reason we do the live streaming is because we want to get the video on YouTube for future reference and archive.
Yeah.
And we used to be able to do it on a camcorder, and it would take me months to get that uploaded. But with the live stream, it's already on YouTube by the time the meeting's over.
Okay. So you're not doing a recording like a Zoom recording and then having to post it up.
Jitsi plugs into YouTube, so
the live stream is Zoom recording.
it's using YouTube as a recording service, right?
Yeah.
And do you take it off YouTube and then cut it, or what's recorded is the video?
Yeah, I generally download the raw video off of YouTube. Or actually, Jerry does that once it's ready because he's the one doing it. Then I trim it out to the start of the presentation. I remove everything before that. And,
Yep.
Then I post that.
And talking about the YouTube live stream chat, I hate that program. It's a coding horror. Like I have an expensive, probably $2,000 laptop from my company, maybe $3,000, really hefty and resourceful. And it slows down my browser if I don't block the YouTube text chat. And in most channels, there isn't much useful stuff in the YouTube text chat. You just see whatever the presenter is responding to. That's the information. Somebody's got a lot of background noise.
Okay, well, it's 7 o'clock. And I'm just reading what John is reading.
I just copy and pasted that from the webpage that I posted earlier.
Okay.
It's the last word in the AMAX versus VI wars.
Yep. Yeah, I was an Emacs person for a long, long time. Used to be a guy that used to walk around our office with Emacs as God's editor. And then my daughter actually slugged, what's his name?
RMS?
Excuse me?
RMS?
RMS, yeah. My daughter used to work as a waitress in a restaurant in Kendall Square. He used to come in all the time. So she was a student at Tufts at the time.
Back in BSS days, I invited him to give a talk one time. And he said he would never come to our meetings unless I changed the name of the group from Boston Linux Units to GNU/Linux group. And that was a deal breaker for me.
Well, to be fair, if you compare the code size of GCC and binutils to the Linux kernel, it's substantially larger.
Oh, it's
yeah.
Linux wouldn't exist without all the commands and stuff that are available through GNU, and certainly. And we had a big discussion at our board of directors meeting. The BLU, when board of directors used to meet, which was a long time ago.
Back in the 90s.
And, I was a proponent for using GNU in the name, but RMS was quite religious about stuff. So
Another part of us, my focus was basically Linux and Unix. So we'd have talks
Yes.
on things, Polaris and AAX, stuff like that. And
Exactly.
if we followed RMS's dictate, we basically would only talk about Linux and have to ignore all the other Unixes that we were talking about.
Yeah, and it's a lot of words, but I can understand him being defensive about all his work that his brand put into it.
Yes.
Yeah, the part I found really frustrating about it is I basically wanted him to give a talk on copyright and patent law. He had a lot
Yeah.
of stuff to say about that, but he basically said the only thing that matters, as far as he's concerned, with respect to us, is the name of the user group. There's such thing basically trumps every other issue.
Yep. Well, that's this. You're talking about the same person who will not pick and choose and adopt a personal computer unless he can program everything about it. And for years, he was using this little, I think it was a ThinkPad, but it was like a really little machine that didn't have a lot of power. But that was the one thing he could get that was portable and ran software the way he wanted to run it.
I think it's more of a marketing problem than like an identification. It's just like, people really don't care about compilers. I think as long as their, programs work.
Yeah. It was the most fun I had was working in compiler space.
To be fair, most people don't care about OS kernels either. They just care about the 3 or 4 applications that they use on a daily basis. And if you don't have that for Linux, well, then I'm not interested.
Yeah.
No one cares that Linux is powering most of the computers in the world if you count servers and Android phones.
Yep.
Well, I think also, if you ask any kind of everyday computer user, like if you ask them what Linux is, then they'll conflate that with, like, say, GNOME. They think like GNOME is Linux, whereas like GNOME is a desktop on Linux. And no one would call Android Linux because all they see is the graphical environment.
Well, yeah. Well, they do. I mean, most people, when they get their first computers, they buy them, Windows is installed and stuff like that, and they don't know anything else unless they, gone to school and stuff like that for it, or they're in the industry.
Whenever I get an Android phone, the first thing I put on is an SSH server, so I can use rsync to back it up.
Yep.
Mhm.
I have an Android tablet with an e-ink screen that I use for reading things, and the way that I copy books onto it is I have Calibre, the ebook collection program, running in a cloud server, and I connect over SSH, mount the Android's file system, and I use Calibre commands to push to the tablet over the internet over SSH, because that's the most convenient way for me to do it. I have Calibre on my cloud server because I might be on any particular computer at any given moment, and Calibre doesn't like to have multiple hosts.
So let's start a discussion on packaging. I was hoping that Dick and Jill would be here, but there are several packaging methods available on computers such as Snap, Flatpak, and Appimage that help developers put together software that can run across different Linux platforms. I know that Flatpak and Snap are actually container-based. or virtual machine based. The problem that Jill had with Thunderbird is that Dick and Jill keep their data on a separate partition, which they call user data. And so everything from their home directory and everything else is there. But when she started using Thunderbird in a snap, she couldn't get to the user data and couldn't get it to share her old Thunderbird permissions and saved mail and everything else.
Jerry, can I interrupt you? Did they
Yes.
switch those two systems you mentioned? Did they switch over to containers? Because last I heard, they had the binary application and its files were an overlay file system from an archive file, and the user files were mounted in a separate security context, but not a container. Did they switch over to containers?
I don't know. I know that Snap has always used virtual machine technology.
Okay, I'll have to look into that.
I
Thank you.
don't know the specific not technology they use, but you have to have the Snap daemon running.
Yeah, but I didn't realize that that was at the level of containers or virtual machines. I thought it was just like a CH root jail.
Yeah, this is Bill Bogstad here. I have played around with Snap a little bit, and my experience with it didn't really make me think it was what I would consider a container. There are the mounted file systems, but for my usage, it really wasn't as separate as I normally think of a container to be. Um, uh, I was thinking about this. I mean, you started off, Jerry, by saying that this was going to be about package, I guess distribution. I forget exactly what you said, but there's that. Whatever you said could cover a lot of things, all the way from Usenet SHAR archives from 20 years ago to the particular things that you mentioned. And just getting back to Snap, one of the things and software distribution, one of the things that Ubuntu has started doing is transitioning what used to be Debian packages to Snap packages. In particular, I think Firefox they don't even like distribute a deb package version of Firefox anymore, and there's more of that going on. And that's a user level sort of application, which I can kind of understand wanting to do that. But the reason I started looking at Snap is because I was interested in Canonical's LXD container system that looks a lot like a VM. And one of the problems for me was that the only way to distribute that software is as a snap. And people talking about other possible distribution methods. The thing that really bugged me about that is I thought of a container system as sort of a system level tool that I wanted to be stable, and Snap wants to update things the moment a new version comes out. And I really didn't want all of my containers dependent on them working with some new version of the container system that
Yeah.
randomly installed. So if anybody can comment on anything I said, I'd appreciate it.
Well, I just want to add to that. I feel kind of weird with, like, when I install a portable application, like if I go and download a Flatpak and install it because there's no alternative, and I choose to install it and I stick it where I want to stick it and I run it the way I want to run it, I feel like that application is like a guest on my system. It's not something that the system, like the system manager, shouldn't know about it, shouldn't care about it, and shouldn't be updating it for me. Like it's a guest, it's a portable application. And the idea of saying, well, we're going to distribute Firefox through the system package manager as a snap, that just feels weird to me. And like you're installing this guest application that isn't really integrated with the system. And there's all these, like, they try to integrate it, but there are all these places where the integration, that the illusion breaks down. And Jerry was talking about the file system issue, like
Yep.
depending on the package format you're using, you might be running an application and like whole pieces of your file system are just missing and the user has no idea how to make them appear so that you can open a file.
Yeah, that was a problem that Jill had, and I gave her a solution that I don't know if it worked or not, because she just went and put on the system version of the Deb version of Thunderbird
Mhm.
because of that particular problem. So I didn't, get that. I'm a Fedora user, and Fedora hasn't yet gone to the same level that Ubuntu has in terms of Snap.
Although they're going there.
Yeah, they will. Looks like they're going to Flatpak, and
Yep.
that's their standard.
Yeah, I'm a Fedora Silverblue user, so I've got an Atomic OS, and
Okay.
I install almost all my apps as either Flatpaks or app images when I can't find the Flatpak. I avoid using Snap in part because I had problems with the way the having to run a daemon to run all of the apps. It's been a while since I looked at Snap, but I decided never to touch it again. But app images, Brendan, are kind of what you're describing. Is you can throw those files anywhere on your file system you want, and that's one of the downsides from my perspective. I like the fact that Flatpaks have a designated location either for a given user or for the system, and I like it because I'm working on putting together some Ansible automation so I can run a single command and fully rebuild my system with known versions of all of the applications and get it a full provisioning stack. But then again, I'm a system administrator and engineer, so I
Yep.
dig down into the weeds a lot.
Yeah. Well, we had a while back, we had Dick Miller, and he was talking about Photox. And Mike Cornelson, who was the developer of Photox, was on. And Mike actually prefers to use Appimage. And he was not a fan of either Flatpak or Snap. He said they were too difficult for him as a developer to use. But I mean, I can see the advantage to these three different packaging managers. And eventually there will be maybe a Linux standard, but I doubt it.
Now, the Linux standard is you can choose among these three popular things.
Until
Or
there's
10.
4.
The Linux standard is that you can build your own.
Yeah. Well, the way I always pitch the Linux desktop to other people is, look, in Windows, if you want to replace the window manager, you don't like how it's behaving, you can't even replace it. And if you tweak it, you're always fighting with the APIs changing. And in Linux, if you don't like the way the window manager is, you just download the source and edit it.
Yeah.
And that has happened, and that's why you have several popular window managers.
I don't know if anyone's kind of quantified this, but like, say you have like a theoretical situation where you have so many packages that are snap packages, like all of the memory overhead for all of the virtual environments, or the all the roots that all those apps are running on, like how much memory overhead is that?
Just buy more memory. I mean, you know, you're talking to a guy that grew up on a 32 kilobytes of memory.
And now a 200 megabyte package for a simple database editor is a reasonable thing now, thanks to Electron.
Yep.
I love Electron, but I wish it was smaller.
Yep.
I can't speak to your question regarding Snap, but as far as Flatpaks are concerned, there is the runtime and SDK, which is separate from the application. So if you have a whole bunch of applications that use the same SDK or runtime, then a lot of the files on disk are identical, and so
So Flatpak packages can depend on each other within the ecosystem, and if you've got GTK from Flatpak, you've only got it once.
there's a little bit of separation between applications and runtimes. So there's a set of different runtimes. There's the free desktop, there's GNOME, there's KDE, and each of those are independently released with new versions. And so you choose the runtime that most suits your application, and you build your application against that particular runtime. Many other people will be building against that same runtime, but it's not so much it's not like Docker where you can take somebody else's application and make that your runtime. There's a much more delineated stratification between just applications and just runtimes. So what you put together is either one or the other, but can't be used as the other type.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, the issue that they need to solve is that when you're running under Linux, you want your application to be able to run with specific versions of different libraries. And as you get into things like GTK or Qt and stuff like that, it can get quite messy if you're trying to build on Ubuntu versus Fedora versus all the Mageia stuff, which is originally comes out of Mandrake Linux.
Not only that, but which version of those desktops does your application require? Like I've got Flatpaks that run on GNOME 40, 41, 42, all
Yep.
running side by side because they're all in Flatpaks depending on the individual types of runtimes.
Yeah, so I personally, I don't see a lot of solution to the problem with them. You know, they try to solve that problem, but again, you have the issue, you know, that's still determined on your specific runtime or your specific run software. I have the same problem with Python, with tkinter, that you know, we wanted to run on a number of different machines. You know, everybody in the group had his own virtual machine, and
Speaking of
TK and tkinter the TK Enter didn't run on a couple of them. And I forget what my solution was at the time. I was actually a system manager at the time for those systems.
Speaking of Python, a number of years ago, I was trying out Jython, which is Python on the Java runtime. And it seemed like it was getting kind of out of date. Does anyone know if they're still maintaining that? If it's like if they're supporting like Python 3 within Jython?
I've
The
been
last
seeing,
stable release is 2.7 according to Wikipedia. And that was 2020. But it sounds like they haven't made the leap to Python 3.0 spec yet.
Last time I looked at it was probably like back in 2014. So I guess that's important.
If we want to add Python packaging into the conversation, I have a recommendation for using a tool called PipX, which will set up a Python virtual environment and create some wrapper scripts in a directory that you assign so that you can isolate different Python packages with all of their appropriate dependency modules. So you
Does
know
that handle C plugins for Python and targeting different CPU architectures?
if your system has the appropriate build packages. If pip would build it successfully, then pipx would work also.
yeah. That's pretty much how we on Red Hat did the product that I was working on. It always ran in a virtual environment because it was for an automated installs. And it would essentially set up a virtual environment for Python, do pip installs of all the dependencies so that you're essentially in a virtual system. And that way, if the requirements for the particular job you're doing required a specific Python module, it would go out and get it using pip. We were going to set up our own pip library. We never really got around it, but we needed a little bit of performance. Setting a local version of the pip library would have saved us some time.
And while we're talking,
those of you who don't know pip, it's an installer for Python modules that is outside of your Linux system. It'll run on Windows, it'll run on Linux. And you can run it as a local user, or you can run it as a system admin, a super user.
Strongly recommend against ever running it as a sysadmin, because if it throws it into the system paths, then you're in for a world of hurt.
Yeah.
One of the strong arguments for pipx, it has its own place and doesn't ever touch the normal paths unless you intentionally misconfigure it.
I'm pretty sure pip and Ubuntu have in the Ubuntu ecosystem, pip will put system libraries in a different place than the apt package manager will put Python system libraries, and one supersedes the other, but they're managed separately. I think that's the case. But yeah, you don't install it system-wide unless you're building a service for multiple users. If you're doing some activity for just you, you install pip libraries in your home folder or in the project folder.
Exactly.
Since we're kind of talking down at the command line rather than application level right now, got another product to throw into the mix. The Linux port of Homebrew. I've had some experience with that for installing command line tools on a Silverblue system, and it's a real headache for that one to work. But I've been able to build Homebrew packages on a Fedora workstation, and then just rsync over the whole directory structure over to Silverblue, and that works pretty nicely. It's a neat way of getting the latest command line tools that either are not updated in Fedora or are simply not available in Fedora.
So Homebrew is a repository of recipes for installing stuff in macOS, right? And
That's how it originated, yes.
So
and
they
then
ported that system over to Linux.
Then there was a fork called Linux Brew, and now they've merged back together, and so it's the same same website, whether you're doing Homebrew for Mac or Homebrew for Linux.
Yeah. So that's a whole other way to manage the concept of portable applications. You can take the source code from upstream and add a recipe to it and say, this is how you compile it in our standard, and then you run that recipe and the software is installed.
And some of the Homebrew stuff is also pre-compiled, and you're just pulling down. I don't know if it's Tarball or what, but you don't always have to compile your Homebrew stuff.
I've never tried Homebrew because I only knew it was for Mac OS.
Hey, doesn't Windows have a similar tool as well? It's like Chocolatey, is that?
Yeah, Chocolatey is the system one, and it's also used inside of Visual Studio. And I think there's another one there's something that's similarly built to Chocolatey, and I'm not sure if it still exists anymore. But I think Microsoft blessed Chocolatey and maybe even adopted the coders. And that's Chocolatey is mostly binary packages installed to a particular folder structure standard, like pip, like apt.
So, Bob, you've had some experience with some of those package managers.
Well, yeah. I am not a technically minded person or a developer like most of the people at the meeting tonight, but just from an end user point of view, I have used Ubuntu, I have used Fedora, I have shoehorned a derivative of Ubuntu onto a Chromebook, so I've used limited resources as well as full resources. And as long as you have full resources, I don't think the extra code bloat seems to bother anything. The app images may be a bit slower to open than most installed programs, but Flatpak and Snap seem to be reasonably quick. What I don't like about Snap is sometimes a Snap will be missing some plugin features, and there's no way to plug them in to that particular Snap. I find that is a particular problem, not so much with web browsers. You can still do extensions. But it can be a problem, I think, with Thunderbird, that some aspects of it are a little more simplified.
So you can't just take a Thunderbird plugin and put that in your profile folder?
Where's the profile folder in a Snap?
Well, I don't
It's
know.
in Snap. It's in Snapd, and Snapd unfortunately has a lot of things mixed together, or at least they're in there in forms that aren't at all like a profile. For example, if I had Clause Mail as an installed program, each one of the mail folders I could just copy, and I could copy it back because it behaves much like a Unix mailbox folder. But if it were a Snap or a Flatpak, that's going to be inside of Snapd or someplace else. It's going to be in that file system, that special file system that is maybe not containerized but secured.
That was specifically Jill's problem because, all of her and Dick's email history was all in the standard Thunderbird .mozilla folder or
And
directory.
if you're a user who understands backing stuff up, and you've got to have it and say, I back up these places in my home folder.
Yep.
If the user interface isn't telling you, by the way, your data's not going to be there, that's pretty scary.
Yeah, Appimage is all over the place. Some of them do things inside their own little world, but many of them will just simply use your file system. So it's a lot easier to do things that can alter the behavior of an Appimage, in my experience with them, but they're still not as configurable as a traditional fully installed app, a native app, shall we say, that's part of your system.
And of course, this brings up an issue of one of the fundamental user system administration differences I've seen between Android and Linux is that in Android, a traditional Android app only really has permission for its own little world, its section of the user's home folder. And then there's also these like generic drop boxes for documents, photos, and whatever. And I can't remember if Android makes the user confirm, will we allow access to documents? But anyway, an Android app has to say, I want to access documents. And if an Android app wants to store data without asking, it goes in its own place, which no other program on the system can access. And I think that's great security-wise, keeping everything nicely sectioned off in separate containers. And there's a certain expectation for how the user is expected to manage all this stuff. Whereas the way the Linux desktop has grown up, just like Windows, you've got a home folder, and if you're running a program as me, then everything in the home folder is open to that program, and you can't say, "Hold on, I want you to ask permission before you open my photos folder."
Yeah, the flip side of that is, say I want to restore something that got corrupted or deleted, and maybe it's some of my email.
Yeah.
That's very easy to do with Clause fully installed.
Yeah, absolutely.
But if it were Flatpak or Snap, well, a little bit less easy.
So I haven't had any problems with any Flatpaks using their normal places in the home directory. I've got several programs that are installed with Flatpak that do in fact use what would be the traditional path underneath the home directory. So I haven't experienced that, but then I haven't done any email clients with a Flatpak yet. But it is easy enough to configure lockdowns, custom lockdowns with a Flatpak. So, like for instance, I think it was the Zoom Flatpak had a wide open permission to my whole home directory, and I didn't like that, so I locked it down to just like my downloads or a couple other paths, and it's really easy to enhance and override the lockdown permissions for Flatpaks. I don't have any experience with Snap, and have not found similar capabilities in Appimage.
Yeah, what I was also getting at with profiles in Thunderbird or Firefox, again, if you had corruption in a profile, you could always find the profile folder, and you could just copy parts of it or the entirety over to the damaged installation, and it would very often restore the whole thing. I don't know whether that works well with Snap or how you would do it.
Yeah, but the basic point is that Jill very specifically needed to point the Thunderbird profile to their common user data because they generally have multiple.
Live streaming is on.
So what were we saying about Joe?
Yeah, the problem, as I mentioned, Jill's or Dick and Jill, you need to refer them as one person, essentially, the way they work.
So Dick and Jill were saying, like, my profile is going to be here, and that's the way it's going to be. And
Yeah.
the Snap package is like, no, you can't do that.
Yeah, which is the problem. And going to one of Dick's meetings is interesting. Dick has not yet learned how to properly use Jitsi.
Well, you know, we're not trying to have everybody screen share today.
Yeah. Yeah. I've done it a few times, and I usually, when I screen share, I usually screen share a Chrome tab. But when you're doing it the way they do, because they want to do an application, so they want to share Thunderbird, they want to share Firefox, but they're running out of Chromium. So it gets a little complex the way you're doing it. So, but they usually end up with the your infinite images. Oh. Kurt's asking a question here. Has anybody had any bad experiences with Alien?
That's that's installing RPMs on a not RPM system, right?
No, it's in his case installing Debs
Oh,
on
it's
an
the other way
RPM
around.
system.
Installing
Yeah.
a Deb package on an RPM system.
Yeah.
I used Red Hat for like 3 months a long time ago, so I've got nothing to say about that. I have nothing bad to say about it. I'm just an Ubuntu person now.
Well, I think, you know, if we're going to talk, I don't have anything bad to say really about Ubuntu. I used Ubuntu back and at an install fest, I upgraded my laptop to Ubuntu, and Ubuntu would not install, and it locked up my laptop. And that particular version, I couldn't install on the laptop, so I ended up installing Fedora on it. And I've been on Fedora ever since. But I've always had Ubuntu and several other distributions set up in virtual machines.
But I guess nobody on the call has installed the Deb package in an RPM system and has any tale to tell about it.
Yeah, I've never used Alien. So I've never had a need for it. Kurt, can you comment?
It might not have a mic attached.
Oh, no mic. You can do hand signals. Okay, he can type.
While we're waiting for Kurt to type, I'll share one disadvantage that I've experienced with Flatpak. I've been promoting it a lot on this call, but one area where I've had issues with is installing a photo downloader. Rapid Photo Downloader, I think, is the name of it, as a Flatpak. When I use it as a Flatpak, it doesn't properly get access to my SD card reader, so I have to run it as a native application over on my Fedora workstation system. Otherwise, I haven't yet figured out where the container security limitations are locking me out of being able to get to the native hardware.
Yeah. You know, one of the things that got Kurt's last post got me thinking. Years ago, I was involved with standards. I was in the compiler group at DEC, and the True 64 compiler group. And the problem was we had to deal with standards. And the bad thing about standards is they're all a pain, because you all have to do things and you have to meet certain standards. And of course, your standard testing programs can break too, which happened to me. But if you had a standard package manager across Linux, you know, that would solve Kurt's problem. You know, get rid of dib altogether and use RPM.
Yep. And now you've got more. Now you've got even more standards added to the mix recently with Apple M1 CPU and Raspberry Pi computers and a few other ARM computers going out there. My coworkers have been saying, "Hey, you should try Lando for managing, creating, and destroying web project environments." And Lando is like, all the conversation about supporting ARM on Lando for the last couple of years has been like, "What, ARM, huh?" And then suddenly the last 6 months or so, like everyone is, "Oh, all these Apple people are going to want M1 CPU support, so we better get on this." So like, you can see software and say, that software works on my operating system, but I can't install it on my computer because I can't figure out how to compile it, and because they don't support my CPU.
Yeah. That's an issue.
So there's always this give and take between standardizing on, this is the platform, this is the spec, this is how things are going to be formatted, and then a new practice comes along and we have to go outside of what the standard specified, and so just never mind the standard, we're going to do a new thing. Now you've got 2 standards, and then you got 4, and then you got 20.
Yeah. Well, of course, I have an electric car, and electric car charging stations are all different standards, but it seems that the CCS standard is emerging in CCS1 in the United States and CCS2 in Europe. China has their own. Japan has SHADMO. But
Tesla just recently caved and just said they're going to support the US standard in the United States.
Yep. In Europe, they've been doing it in Europe.
Yeah.
Most of the Teslas they build in Europe, or most of the testers they deliver in Europe, it was up until recently they were sending them from Shanghai, have CCS adapters directly in the cars. So, but I mean, it's nice with a Tesla. You go to a supercharger and you just plug it in. But if you go to, let's say, if you have, let's say, a CCS adapter, and you go to Electrify America, for instance, you've got to look at whether to go at a 150 kilowatt station or a 600 kilowatt station. And if you're a slower thing like a Volkswagen ID4, you can plug in at a 600 kilowatt station, but you're only going to get 100 kilowatts. And then the poor Porsche driver who can do a fast charge at 600 kilowatts can't use it because your car is sitting there and not at a slower one. So it gets confusing. So you have to look at that for charging stations. And then there's plug and play. As I said, Tesla has plug and play. You plug it in and that's it. Does all the negotiation. You have an account. The account goes with the car.
If you can find a Tesla station.
I have a lot more Tesla stations than you have Electrify America or EVgo stations. Mm-hmm. I mean, I've actually got one within walking distance of here. But Tesla, one of the things that made me a believer in Tesla is several years ago, I was in Moab, Utah, and they had a Tesla supercharger station there in the middle of nowhere. And you could essentially drive a Tesla to almost anywhere in the United States and southern Canada and not have a problem finding a supercharger station. And it will come right up on the map. But the other electric cars have some of Tesla's capabilities, not all. But there's some good electric cars out there. And I threw up a map the other day showing a trip in I think in a Kia EV6 across the United States from Boston to Los Angeles. And the map showed all the charging stations along the way. Now, one of the things Tesla can show very nicely right on the nav system is for any single Tesla charging station, it will show how many ports are available. If you have an 8-station charging location, it'll show 4 used and maybe 4 are available, something like that. And you apparently, from the reviews I've seen, Electrify America and EVgo are a little more spotty because usually there's several plugs that just are unusable. And of course, in the West Coast and Tesla, they've been cutting the cables. In some cases, they're cutting the cables, and it's definitely for copper. But there are some cases where they're cutting the cables not even not even close to the beginning. They're just cutting the cables in the charging stations.
What do you mean by cutting the cables? You mean reducing the number?
Vandalism.
No, vandalism.
Oh, to steal the copper?
Some people are doing it to steal the copper, but some aren't.
Some are probably politically motivated.
Oh,
Yeah, there was a couple of cases where cables were cut, and there were cameras at the charging station, but they knew there were a couple of stations that were out of camera range, and these cables were cut somewhere in the middle. And if they're going to steal the copper, you're going to want to cut it to where you get the most copper. And so these weren't for copper; these were for political reasons.
wow.
And there were a number of cases, especially in the South, where people would park their cars very specifically to block the charging stations.
Is there recorded evidence or like a calling card left behind, or we just assume political reasons because there's no other motivation?
We assume political reasons. I haven't seen anyone posting or anything on that particular news article that I read.
Yeah, it probably is something political, either Musk or the electric cars versus something else. But don't assume for like all the way unless somebody actually said that's why I did it.
Yeah. So
there's people in Manhattan that just walk up and down the street bashing car windows, and like there's one instance where this person was chased by a storekeeper, and they had video and everything, and they followed the guy until the guy ran into cops, and then the guy got released the next day. Then they're never prosecuted, and then he was back on the street doing it like 2 days later.
Yeah.
And nobody can come up with any motivation for that other than just, I'll get away with it and it feels good.
Yeah, there's some people that do that.
I mean, I can imagine it as sort of a class resentment, saying, "Oh, there's these rich Yankees coming down with their expensive cars, and and they're all, progressive Democrats." Maybe so they get back at them. Maybe.
Could very well be. These, I think, the cord cuttings were, I think, in the Pacific Northwest, if I can remember. The blocking of the charging stations seemed to have been down in the Carolinas somewhere. And I don't know if these were just routine things or just basically just a couple of different charging stations. Could also be Hyundai users getting pissed off that Tesla, they can't charge a car at a Tesla station.
Yeah.
All the stories I heard about it, was more about promoting fossil fuels.
Yeah.
Please say that again, Jeff.
The cars blocking the chargers were not electric cars. They were like these big
Yes.
smoke filthy large pickup trucks that like spew huge clouds of.
Yeah, that's another thing. It's not called steam rolling, smoke rolling, or something like that. Which
the cars that are blocking the chargers, are they occupied or they're left alone?
I don't remember. I don't know.
Because that's really asking. Like if you block a business function like that, you're just asking to get random vandalism done against your vehicle.
Mm-hmm.
Like And I could easily see somebody see a parked truck like that, slash the tires and run off because I
Oh,
wanted to charge here and you blocked me.
I certainly agree with that.
Well, that's probably part of what they want. They want to be the victim so they can post and try to get sympathy on social media.
Yeah, well, if you own one of these charging station areas, the simplest thing is just to get everybody towed, but it's costly.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it takes time and it's costly, and it's like playing whack-a-mole in an arcade game.
Yeah. There was recently a news item about Tesla uploading their some of their software. Their Linux. Tesla runs on Linux. If you didn't know that.
What package manager do they use?
And Elon Deek. But you know, it's interesting. When Tesla has a recall, it's almost always fixed by a download. So you see in the news, oh, there's 140,000 cars recalled at Tesla. Yeah, and it can all be done by a download.
And when you're talking about the computer inside a Tesla, I assume you mean a network of computers where one machine
Yes.
is driving the navigation, another machine is driving the engine.
Yep.
And they talk to each other over a network, but there's some separation.
Yeah. Yeah. I had a case where I had a 1 gig. Let's see if I can get this up here. I had a 1 terabyte USB, and it's one of these fake ones from Amazon. And I plugged it into my USB connection. The USB connection for the USB-A connection in the Tesla glove is in the glove compartment for the dash cam. And I plugged it into the dash cam and closed the glove box. And that caused my Tesla screen to go blank. And you can't open the glove box because the glove box opens by voice command. And so that's dead. But you can still drive the car. You just, at this case, you don't have the navigation or dashboard or something else. Everything else works fine, the brakes and stuff like
They're
that.
still working. They're still working out the threat models and the overrides, I guess.
Yeah, I drove it down to Watertown where there's a Tesla repair station, and they fixed the car in about an hour.
Yeah,
All they had to do was open the glove box.
That's something that the user should have been able to do.
Yeah, that's been taking some criticism that in a Model Y, the glove box you open by a soft button or by a voice command. And there's no way to open it otherwise.
So no manual overrides with these.
With the glove box, yeah. There is
Very secure.
There is a button pack that you can get where you can plug it into the Tesla and you can program these buttons for a number of different functions, including opening the glove box. But there's no mechanical way for the glove box to open by the user. It's just a pain. They have to get it from the back.
Well,
and they may fix that, or they may have already fixed that in some of the newer Model Ys.
And don't forget, if Tesla doesn't like you, they can always lock you out of the entire car.
Yeah, it seems to me to be very secure.
That's actually true.
And what happens when somebody else who doesn't like you takes over Tesla?
Yeah. Well, I think almost all of your electric cars are going to be that way.
That doesn't make it right.
Nope. As one of my coworkers said, yeah, it's software, it has bugs. Yeah, I can't talk very succinctly on the hacking of Tesla, but
But
I'm sure,
as we learned from Musk in the last couple of weeks, there's always the hostile takeover.
yes, there is.
And you're buying into whatever the future of that platform is when you buy something like a Tesla.
Yeah, but I love the car. I can park the car and then I can tell the car to come and pick me up.
Did you see that video of the Tesla that was called and ran into a small plane in an airport?
I didn't see that, but I know of that video. Yeah. Now I've actually used the Smart Summon a couple of times. I actually did it one time. Matter of fact, same restaurant I was at today for lunch. And I was able to bring the car up to the front of the restaurant. It was in the winter. And the person parked next to me was very impressed with that. But apparently they monkeyed with it lately, so it doesn't quite work as well. It can only work if you're in a parking lot. Or in one case, I was in a park. I was in an actual park, and I had finished a walk, and I had summoned my car down to meet me, and it took a while because it was a dirt road and stuff like that. But I love it. You know, I put it on. I'm only 2 minutes like from the Mass Pike or US 90, Interstate 90, and I put it in autopilot, on navigation by autopilot, and then it can actually take the exits and get onto I-95 automatically, and from there up Route 3. I like it when it gets on from I-95 to Route 3, but I usually take it off before it gets on to go from I-90 to I-95, because the exits, I think it goes a little too fast in the exits. I'm not comfortable with it. You know, the guys I had lunch with, they were, well, one guy was not a pilot, but they were all, you know, Vietnam friends of mine, and 3 of them were pilots for DEC. Or 2 of them were pilots for DEC, not 3 of them.
Was there any you know if there are any toolkits for writing your own software for the Tesla?
Do I have any what? Software toolkits? I don't know what you're talking about, Jabber.
You want to write your own apps to run on your Tesla? Is there a toolkit for that?
I don't know. I think there is. But they're pretty closed on that because for the...
You're talking about the information computer, I assume.
Yep.
And they're going to be very protective of that, because if somebody makes some information application for that computer that is too entertaining and distracting, who's on the hook for if it causes an accident?
Yeah. One of the recalls they had was you could actually watch YouTube or watch videos while you're driving. And now you can't do that. That was a recall. Another recall they had.
And was that like just push a few buttons? Didn't need to install someone's special hack?
No, it was just a standard download. Tells you what's downloading, and you can schedule the download to occur at a different thing.
The case law hasn't figured out who's responsible for what, and I imagine Tesla is going to be very protective of what you can put on there now.
Yep. Another thing that they turned off is Tesla has a thing called Boombox, and they also have a app called Emissions Control. And emissions control is fart mode. So you can make.
I think I heard that.
Yeah, you can make the seat farts.
And the external loudspeaker too, can't you?
And the boombox. And you have that, and then they actually had to turn that off because it wasn't loud enough when the Tesla was going slow enough, because people need to hear the car. So that was one of their recalls. So fart mode, external fart mode, no longer works unless you're stopped.
Since we got off topic, I've got to plug this, and I have no relationship with the company, but if you miss your BlackBerry and you want something that's new and up to date, I got a Unihertz Titan Pocket. It runs Android 10 or 11, and I love it. And there's a larger version of this that weighs a little bit more. They said that the one that's not Pocket is it's a lot to hold if you're laying down in bed. So I got the slightly smaller one, but it's got a real chiclet keyboard and a touchscreen, and it runs Android.
That's nice.
Unihertz Titan is the name of the product.
Huh.
Yeah.
And another thing about this phone is if you're old and your eyes are very weak, and I'm starting to hit that threshold, you're going to want to get the larger version, because this has a small 720 by 720 screen, and the DPI control doesn't work very well. The browser that I use, it allows text to be too small, and I haven't figured out how to fix that yet. Don't get a tiny 720 by 720 screen. I killed the conversation. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I'm just responding to Kurt.
No, I'm writing it down. I'm going to look it up later. Sounds intriguing to me.
Yeah, they were in Seabrook, and they were associated with another company, and I bought some stuff off of them. I actually met the owner while I was supercharging in Seabrook.
You're talking about Unihertz or something else?
No, Electrified Garage.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I was actually a supercharger, and then the guy wanted to sell me a backseat armrest and drink holders. But actually, he moved to Florida. He was Electrified Garage's partner, and they moved to Florida. But the people from Electrified Garage were actually Tesla employees. And they actually have a special relationship with Tesla.
He works on DeLoreans. Does he do hover conversions?
Yeah, DeLorean is interesting. These were some guys that started a business to repair DeLoreans and rebuild DeLoreans. And they're coming out with a new DeLorean electric car.
Is it going to break down every 20 miles?
It depends how you program it.
Is this the shop in Texas? I know there's a big operation in Texas that is like all used DeLoreans and DeLorean parts. I don't know the name of it.
Yeah, I'm not sure. It's they actually have the DeLorean brand.
Mhm.
So I'm not sure if it's the same company. There was on what's the name of the TV show? Expedition X. And they had a thing on DeLoreans. They were tracking down the actual DeLoreans that were used in the movie Back to the Future and subsequent movies. And they wanted to actually track down the actual DeLoreans that are actually used in the movies.
Did they find them?
Yes.
Was
The
one of
guy-
them in the Smithsonian for a while, or no?
Yeah, there's one in a museum. There's one in Massachusetts. One of the actors who played Dr. Brown, what was his name?
Christopher Lloyd, the Klingon.
Chris, yeah. He was on that show. He traveled with them. And Disney actually has one, I believe, or Universal has one, I don't remember. But the one that they had on display was actually a mock-up. But it was a pretty good TV show.
My sister ended up sitting next to Christopher Lloyd, the actor, on a long distance bus trip once, and she said that he was very pleasant and fun to talk to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I can tell you what Jerry Springer once did on a long distance bus trip.
Was it something that belongs on the Jerry Springer show?
Yes. Yeah, I just know what he was doing on it. Yeah, I haven't talked to Jerry in a few years.
Oh, you know him?
Yeah, he's my fraternity brother.
Oh, okay. Interesting.
Yeah, he was once the mayor of Cincinnati. And we had a speaker at the BLU one time. I forget what it was on, and the speaker's name was Chip Ock, who was from Cincinnati. And I went to high school with his father. I went after his father was also from Cincinnati. No, but I lived with Jerry for 4 years or 3 years in the fraternity house. And I dated his girlfriend after they broke up. Because at the time she was our fraternity sweetheart and wanted her to date someone in the fraternity.
Is Bob sleeping on camera?
Is what?
Is Bob sleeping?
I don't know.
No, I can listen with my eyes closed. And
That's fine.
quite frankly, it's been a long day and a long weekend.
Yeah, you said it was
I
going to be.
hear what is being said.
It's okay if you're not.
I can blank my video if people find it distracting.
Yeah.
No, not at all.
Well, we used to have fun with John. Used to go to sleep in the meetings, and Blake Parker bought a squirt gun. You might have been there because those were the days when you were still in Boston, Brendan.
Yeah, I do remember. I don't remember the squirt gun, but I remember people falling asleep, and
Yeah.
probably I remember Jabber.
Yeah.
I had a professor who would always answer somebody's phone if the phone rang.
Mm-hmm. I had some weird professors. I had one guy at Boston University. When I was working at Raytheon, BU taught courses at Raytheon. And this guy used to talk to the door, never never talk to the students. And
Interesting.
You really missed Jim Morrison.
Was that because he had trouble focusing on people's faces, or it was distracting?
I have no idea. I ran into him later. I took the shuttle bus to Deck one time when my car was broke down. I had my wife drop me off at a local area where they had a van, picked him up, and he was actually in the van. He was working for Deck. Oh. By the way, if anybody's interested, the helicopter in the background is a H model Huey that actually flew in Vietnam with my company. And it's, I don't have my logbook, but that was one of the, belonged to my platoon. And I'm 100% sure that I flew that.
Is it sitting next to a highway?
Yeah, it's been restored.
Is that adjacent to an airport, or it just happens to be sitting there in that spot?
Sitting there in that spot. I just picked it off my company's website. But they had it showing that this was one of the Hueys that was restored that actually was part of our company in Vietnam.
Those are known for being like really easy to fly, right?
Have you ever flown a helicopter?
No. Or is it the opposite? They're known for being really hard to fly.
Well, Hueys are a lot easier to fly than, let's say, some of the smaller helicopters. But with a helicopter, you have 5 controls that have to keep changing. You have the cyclic, which you hold in your right hand. You have the anti-torque rotors with your feet, and you have the collective in your left hand, and that makes the helicopter go up and down. And then at the end of that, you have a throttle.
Yeah,
And
I'll take an auto gyro, thanks.
yep, and they all work together. If you pull pitch, you have to also give it a little pedal. Or if you add more throttle, you have to do more pedal and stuff like that. And of course, pedal operates the tail rotor, and again, that needs more power. So the helicopter is a complete feedback loop.
Hmm.
And so one of the training things they do is after you've done some air work, while the flight instructor gives you the cyclic, that's one with your right hand, then the pedals, and then he gives you the collective, and everything goes to hell. You're in a hover, and your flight instructor then has a heart attack and lands here. But it gets, you have to develop muscle memory to fly a helicopter. It's a lot different. I had about 200 hours in fixed wing training before I went into helicopters, and it was just like learning from scratch. I knew I could do the air work because when you're at altitude, a helicopter flies pretty much like a regular airplane. But when you're in a hover, everything's much different.
I imagine it's as complicated as learning to walk, and it usually takes people about a year and a half to learn how to walk.
Yeah. Yeah, we had, in the Army, we had flight training was 8 months for officers, 9 months for enlisted men. And the first 4 months was with the small helicopters in Texas. And that was just learning how to fly a helicopter, essentially. And then you go to Alabama at Fort Rucker, and you go the bigger helicopters, the Hueys. And the Hueys have, hydraulics, and they have, you can tighten you can trim them up a little bit. So
Are there any
unlike,
helicopters that are fly-by-computer now, where you just give it commands instead of
Yes.
controlling all the controls individually?
Yeah, they've been around for quite a while. But it's, if you look at the Coast Guard, they're flying the H-60s, which are essentially Blackhawks. And they've got a lot of automation in those aircraft.
Mhm.
As long as, but you still, when they do hoists and stuff like that, they really have to have pilots that know what they're doing.
Sure.
Yeah, I've done an altitude hoist. When you're hovering at 100 feet, you can't see the person or what's underneath you. Your crew chief actually has to give you directions. You have to hold it steady. You don't want to swing the guy out. And I've done that a couple of times. And that's not easy to do.
Fire.
What did you say?
Especially hard on the fire.
Well, at that point, we weren't on a fire, but we were in a combat area. Usually when the Hueys come under fire, we're usually down at ground level doing insertions or exsertions. That's, and of course we had we had a couple of assaults where our own gunships were shooting at us.
Ooh.
Well, the LZ was a Rocky LZ, and they were prepping the LZ, and the rockets were ricocheting back into the helicopters.
Hmm.
And we actually, one of our crew chiefs got wounded, minor wound, but he was wounded on in that LZ. Yeah, combat assaults were things, what they essentially, they put white phosphorus. The artillery would prep the LZ, and the last round should be a white phosphorus. And then you come in a few seconds after that, and then your gunships would do some prep work before you go in. And then you come in, you're clean when you go in, because all the Charlies got their heads down and stuff like that. But the other way, taking your troops out is more dangerous, because you go into the LZ, the troops are running towards the helicopters. So their backs are to any snipers you get, and that's when the snipers come out. We've had that happen to us when our gunships, we're faster than the gunships. And we went in to do the exertion before the gunships showed up. And half of our aircraft got a few rounds. But none of us got shot down, none of us got hurt. So I think we're pretty much done with the discussion on the Flatpaks, Appimages, and Snap. Any other comments? John, thank you for joining us. Feel free to join us again.
Yeah, it was very interesting. I learned a lot of things about other things too tonight.
Yeah, we have a question and answer period at the start of the meeting. We generally start a formal speaker around 7:15, and formal speaker will talk for an hour or two. John, any thoughts about maybe getting Bob Frankston back? Or is he too boring?
I guess we could bring him back if he's available, if he's interested.
Yeah, he usually is. Yeah, Bob Frankston is one of the developers of VisiCalc, which was the original spreadsheet program.
I just learned the other day that VisiCalc, you actually had to trigger a re-render of the screen, didn't you? It wasn't automatic.
I don't remember. It was on an Apple II.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it legitimized the Apple II. People would be going into the store and say, "I want a VisiCalc machine."
Yeah. Yeah, it didn't. It wasn't as dynamic as the newer ones. I actually bought my first version of VisiCalc directly from Dan.
If anybody wants to try VisiCalc, just go to the archive.org software library and search VisiCalc, and it'll run an Apple II and VisiCalc in your browser.
Okay.
They've got thousands of software packages set up with in the browser emulators for whatever platform it is, and just ready to go. You push a button, it starts up.
Yeah.
Jerry and John, are you running Drive for presentations? Are you looking for presenters?
Yes.
We're looking for- yeah.
I don't have any ideas off the top of my head right now, but I'm always like, I present in situations like this a couple of times a year, and I've always got stuff on my mind. Although I'm not kind of blank at the moment, but my home computer club, New York Amateur Computer Club, is really focused on amateur, and there's a lot of stuff I would talk about that they don't want to hear. Is there anything that any kind of topic you're looking for, or that I could do?
I would welcome just about anything.
Mhm. Lately,
yeah.
I've been interested in ProcessWire, content management system that is a good alternative to WordPress, and that's just one idea that comes to mind.
Yeah, that would be good. A lot of people are interested in WordPress, especially if they maintain websites,
Mhm.
stuff like that.
The one thing I wanted for a long time, and I've never had any luck getting it. I want to get a good talk on about IPv6.
Mhm.
We've had like probably 5 or 6 presentations in the past where I specifically told them I wanted like a hands-on kind of thing. I don't want an evangelist thing.
I think this was brought up in the last meeting that I attended, and somebody directed the question to me, and I'm like, well, I don't even have IPv6 at my home. Verizon didn't turn it on for some reason. So I'm not the one for that, for sure.
Yeah, we did have years ago a guy from DEC who was on the IPv6 committee. And that was a long time ago. But the presenters we've had on IPv6 really have not been very good.
The talk I was looking for is I want to switch. I want to deploy IPv6. How do I do it? And that's what I asked for. And every presenter I asked, when they came in, they said, "Here's why you want to go to use IPv6. Now go figure out how to do it."
The entire industry kind of had that attitude.
Yep.
But I can email John and Jerry like in a couple of days. I can email like, here's like 5 ideas that I have and what sounds like a good idea for the club, and you can get back to me.
Yeah, we'd love to. Yeah, you've been a long time member, Brendan. So.
Mm-hmm. Well, am I a member if you hadn't seen me for years and I live in New York City now?
You've attended a meeting, you're a member.
Okay.
Especially you've actually been to the brewery with us.
Mm-hmm. Did I ever present at MIT?
I don't remember you ever presenting.
Yeah, I think probably not.
No. Yeah, I usually remember,
But I heard the check.
I remember most of the people that used to come to the brewery at the after meeting meetings, or some people that used to stand up and talk during the meetings. That's how I know Paul Jameson. And then when I worked at Raytheon that one time in Bedford, I bumped into Paul there.
I just checked the calendar database. No, Brandon, you're not in it. So I guess it does the work.
And what was that? Did you say it's blank?
Your name's not in the databases.
Oh, so you're saying yes, I never presented. That sounds right.
No.
Around the time when I was still living in Boston, I did a presentation. I did probably 2 or 3 presentations in a couple of different contexts before I moved to New York City about 8 years ago. But I'll think about what would be good topics, and I'll let you know, and we can negotiate from there.
Okay, that'd be great.
And if you're really hurting for June, I can do June. Otherwise, probably July.
It'd probably be best to get June filled before it gets too close to the meeting date. So
Yeah. Well, I could do either, but if anybody sounds like June would work for them, you can put them in front of me.
Okay. Yeah, somebody mentioned, Kurt mentioned Christoph. Yeah, Christoph Dorbeck used to do Linux soup presentations here, and he originally worked for Fidelity and then went over to Red Hat. And he still works for Red Hat, but he moved down to Texas recently. He's originally from Texas.
Oh, and do you have any plans to move back into a classroom and continue the online meetings at the same time, or no more online meetings? What's your strategy?
That all depends on MIT.
Yeah. It looks like COVID is ramping back up a little bit, and I don't think MIT is going to open it up for user groups.
Yeah, that's pretty much the situation in the New York Amateur Computer Club. We used to use a classroom in NYU, and the talk from them is basically you're not invited until further notice. And I have a plan for, as the audio video guy, my plan is to have a hybrid. I may have talked about this here in a BLU meeting before. Have sort of a hybrid meeting where if we get back into a classroom, I'm going to say, okay, that we've got the speaker and we've got the audience, and they can all informally talk directly to each other. And I'm going to live stream. I'm collecting audio and video streams.
Is on.
Oh, I thought it already started. I want to do a hybrid meeting setup with the presenter's computer and a camera and a lav mic all feeding into my internet computer, broadcasting that live on YouTube or whatever. And the audience can talk, the in-person audience can talk directly to the presenter, but I'll say that if you're remote and you want to say something, say it in the chat room, and I will relay it to the presenter. And I'm figuring that's probably the best strategy, because if you put a remote audience on a loudspeaker, it just kind of turns into pandemonium pretty quickly.
Take a look at some of the Zoom meetings that these courts are using.
Mm-hmm.
In Michigan, all the courts are now on Zoom with, and they stream on YouTube.
Yeah.
And there's some very interesting judges.
But as I said, we don't have any start getting invited back into NYU, and we don't have any other alternative venues.
Yeah. I have an uncle who's still a professor there.
Mm-hmm.
He actually retired. He was the longest tenured professor when he retired. But I think he unretired so he could he was living in the faculty housing. And he had to kind of unretire to keep this faculty housing. I actually had two uncles who were professors there.
Oh, and we didn't bug John, the new guy. Do you have any presentation ideas?
Not on your level.
It can be anything. What are you working on? Just you can share anything.
Yeah, I'm helping beginner Linux users in a national group.
That's a story.
So yeah.
No pressure though.
No.
Yeah, we have a beginners user group. I mentioned Dick and Jill Miller. They do Jitsi also.
Oh, and Jerry and Jabber, this idea of I have to come up with a list of presentations and email them to you. That's the same task for 6 months now. I've been saying, oh, I should write a blog post about that. Oh, I should write a blog post about that. And I haven't actually written down the list of things that I need to write a blog post about. So the idea is like kind of come and go. And I need to write them down and say, all right, I've got to write 2 of
Yeah.
these this weekend.
Yeah.
I just went through that a couple days ago. I was to go for to give a speech at my Toastmasters meeting, and I did that last night. So on Monday evening, I was like racking my brain to come up with a topic. Finally, I just try to remember some stories from when I was a little kid. And I actually came up with a lot more than I thought I'd ever would have remembered from back then, for like the first 7 years of my life. Probably write a blog post with each one of them. Well, if you need any help with doing hybrid meetings, I've been running hybrid meetings for my Toastmaster Club since January.
Mhm.
I've gotten pretty good at it.
Well, right now I pretty much have an approach, and there's a couple of pieces of hardware that I need that I have not bought. But it's kind of like, well, if it goes another 2 or 3 years without me being allowed back in the classroom, I buy the hardware now. So I have the outline in my head, and when it gets closer, I'll prototype it at home.
And I think the most important thing you need to remember is that really the most important component about it is the audio. If the audio sucks, the meeting's going to suck.
Yep, absolutely. And I'm either going to have 1 or 2 mics, either a room mic on the camera at the back of the room and a lav mic on the presenter, or just a lav mic on the presenter and a compression. And when the audience speaks, it'll be a little far away, but intelligible. And I have that experience with a lav mic recording the audience from the presenter's chest, and it works well enough if you're going to record a single channel.
Problem with that, having more than 1 mic in the same room, you're going to get feedback.
Yeah, you've got to, well, only 1 sound source, like just the presenter's computer and no other sound source. But with multiple mics, you need to choose one or the other and not both at the same time.
Exactly.
So it's more load on the person running the broadcast machine if you're doing it live.
Yep.
Because I use this little electronics device. Holding up right now, if you can see it.
Yeah.
I can't tell because I can't see myself in the window. That's what it was. This has really excellent sound quality. It's a P7200 conference mic. Like it does. Works well. Very played up. Second one.
What are you saying? Jabber, you muted. You're not going across.
Yeah.
Yes. You're good. John, you're muted too, for whatever you said.
I was just saying, no, he's not. He's still gone.
Okay. Well, he's coming to us from Mars anyway. So we're going to close it up.
Sure.
Thank you all for coming.
See you
Thank
next month.
you for letting me in.
Not a problem. You're welcome anytime.